Today we're talking about Raikou and the TCG, and before we get into any of the legendary beasts, yes, they are legendary beasts, not dogs. Raikou is literally a saber-toothed cat. And it has what I feel is maybe the best design of any legendary Pokemon. And y'all can fight me on that. What legendary Pokemon is better designed than Raikou? Mewtwo, maybe? It's also part of one of my least favorite catching mechanics in roaming Pokemon, but how was Raikou represented in the TCG as far as competitive play, collectability, aesthetics, gimmicks? Let's get into it, starting with Raikou's first appearance in the mainline TCG in Neo Revelation. This card first showed up in the Neo Premium File Collection 3, where it had some connecting artwork with Entei and Suicune. Legendary Body is useful in preventing energy cards getting discarded by energy removal, but it actually hurts this card way more than it would ever help because this Raikou only has 60 HP. Legendary Body makes it so that you can't attach a Focus Band or Goldberry, meaning that it's going to be pretty easy to knock out, especially since its only attack requires 3 lightning energy just to deal 30 damage. And yeah, you flip a coin and potentially deal some bench damage, but really all this card has going for it is that free retreat. Neo Revelation also had a holo version of Raikou, and man, this is a stunning card. All 3 of these legendary beast holo cards in Neo Revelation are some of my favorite vintage cards. From an aesthetic perspective at least, just the way the artwork, the actual holo, the card formatting, all of that combined just looks so good. Truly cardboard at its best. And this time with a Pokemon power that's actually workable. Whenever you attach a lightning energy from your hand to Raikou, you can gust out one of your opponent's benched Pokemon. Not particularly unique, depending on the format you're playing in, you're going to have access to either Gust and or Double Gust, or Warp Point, but you know, at least this time your 3 lightning energy are going towards something a little more substantial with 50 damage. Off of a coin flip, you do have the chance of dealing 20 damage to yourself, but thankfully this Raikou, that has 80 HP, has the ability to attach a Focus Sash or a Goldberry. 50 for 3 energy isn't astounding, it's kind of decent. Across formats, a lot of other electric-type Pokemon are going to overshadow Raikou, which is a shame since the Neo block would have been the ideal time to actually bulk up some legendary beast cards and let them strut their stuff. So what about the Japanese exclusive VS Raikou? Or should I say Rockets Raikou? This was coming out around the same time as the Pokemon Chronicles Legend of Thunder episodes, which if you haven't watched those 3 episodes, I highly recommend it. It actually follows Pokemon characters from the game, which is what I always personally wanted from the anime. You get to see your Gen 2 Pro Tags actually do stuff, Ethan and Chris. And it's one of the few appearances of the Team Rocket duo, Attila and Hun, which this card does not reference. Usually if there's a special or a movie and a promotional card wants to reference a specific trainer or Team Rocket member, then it'll include the actual picture of that member. So this isn't specifically Attila or Hun's Raikou, it's just Rocket's Raikou. Competitively, not a very good card, but that's kind of par for the course of VS Pokemon. It's neat looking though, makes a really nice collection piece, especially alongside the Rocket's Suicune and Rocket's Entei. Now into E-card proper with Skyridge Raikou. Some pretty great artwork, and a slightly annoying Pokebody Impure Body, which requires you to discard an energy from Raikou whenever you attach a lightning energy from your hand onto Raikou. The simple solution to this is to use something like Electabuzz to reflect energy cards onto Raikou so that you're not having to attach them directly from your hand. But is it worth it to go through the hassle to pull off a Lightning Sphere? For 3 energy, you're doing a base damage of 40, and you may flip a coin. If heads, discard all lightning energy attached to Raikou, and the attack does an extra 20 damage for each lightning energy discarded that way. If you're running a pure lightning deck, then that coin flip can mean the difference between 40 damage and 100 damage, which for 3 energy, 100 damage is pretty damn good. Especially considering that you could just move Raikou back to the bench and power it up with another active Electabuzz. The main issue with this Raikou is that it does have to heavily rely on a support Pokemon like Electabuzz to get powered up in the first place, and even then its damage output isn't exactly consistent. So on to the Team Magma versus Team Aqua set where we got our first Raikou EX. A 100 HP basic that can attack right away because it has a 1 energy attack in Dazzle Blast, deal some chip damage, potentially confuse your opponent. That could help stall out for a turn while you're building up Lightning Tackle, which is going to deal 70 damage for 3 energy. Not bad. Flip a coin and if tails, you do 20 to yourself. The card itself isn't necessarily bad, but for an EX basic Pokemon, it is bad. This is during that rough period at the beginning of the EX era where they were still trying to figure out exactly what an EX Pokemon should look like as a fair trade-off for 2 prize cards, but the EX Pokemon almost always had a single prize counterpart that did almost exactly the same thing, if not better. For example, Team Magma's Groudon was a single prize attacker with 100 HP, still a basic Pokemon, that has better support and is also going to be dealing 70 damage with a 3 energy attack, more likely 80 damage since Team Magma's Groudon could utilize Special Darkness energy. So there's not a whole lot of reason to use an EX and risk giving your opponent 2 prize cards when you can accomplish the same thing with single prize attackers. The only reason I can see justifying using something like Raikou EX over a single prize attacker is if you are just really wanting to hit for lightning weakness, which is a justification that pops up for later Raikou cards. Our next EX is Rocket's Raikou EX from the Deoxys set, where again we're looking at dealing 70 damage for 3 energy. But that is the only attack that Rocket's Raikou has, so it's not going to be very useful at the beginning of the game. And it's not going to be hitting anything for lightning weakness since it is a dark type Pokemon. I guess it is a dark type alternative attacker in lightning decks. Its Pokepower Lightning Burst lets you use a gusting effect whenever you attach a darkness energy to it. Not pure gust though, because your opponent does get to pick what gets moved up into the active position. Overall, it's just kind of a forgettable card. Even playing throughout the EX era, I don't remember ever seeing this card in play. But maybe that was just my region. Pop Series 2 Raikou was a blister pack promo. It does have a gusting attack for 1 energy, but overall, not a whole lot to talk about here. In Unseen Forces, we got Raikou Star, and this is an interesting one. These Star Pokemon you can only have 1 of in your deck, and they usually had some type of effect or attack that would just boost an already existing strategy, but this Raikou doesn't really have that. Instead, it's got an okay first attack and lightning turn, and then Meta Voltage is a pretty solid 3 energy attack. It's going to deal 70 damage, but if you're currently winning the game, then Raikou Star makes sure that you're not winning anymore. If you have less prizes than your opponent when you use Meta Voltage, you're not only going to deal 70 damage to your opponent, you're going to deal 40 damage to everything on your side of the field, including Raikou, which is half of its HP. If this ever saw play in decks, I've never been aware of it. If somebody has used Raikou or has noticed it in play, then please let me know what the usability of Raikou Star is. A Raikou that did see some play was the one released in Secret Wonders. Now, admittedly, this is one that people were initially excited about, tossed it into a lot of decks, went into a lot of pre-release decks, and then play started to drop off as people realized that there were just much better electric types, like Electivire or Ampharos, but Raikou is still maybe like just a good 1 or 2 of in any electric deck in the DP era. Thunder Rumble is a Pokepower that plays like a Pokebody. The difference being that it's not automatic. You do have the choice of placing a damage counter on one of your opponent's bench Pokemon when you play a Lightning Energy from your hand onto Raikou. The DP era and a lot of late EX era cards did have a lot of Pokemon that could place damage counters, could move them around. Those were mainly Ghost Pokemon though. This Raikou really fits best in a pure electric deck because of its 3 energy attack, Thunder Climb. When you use Thunder Climb, you're going to mill the top 3 cards of your deck and you're going to deal 50 damage plus 10 more for each Lightning Energy discarded that way, but those Lightning Energy do not go in the discard. You get to attach those to one of your Pokemon. Secret Wonders had a ton of really nice tools for electric decks, so it was pretty easy to toss together a really good electric rogue. But if you were wanting to run a hyper-competitive electric deck, you were running the Motor Drive Electivire. That also came out in Secret Wonders. It has amazing synergy with itself. Its damage output is higher. Motor Drive's just good on its own. And sadly, Raikou didn't mesh very well with Electivire because Motor Drive wants you to have Lightning Energy in your discard, and Raikou is attaching them straight off the top of your deck onto a Pokemon. So moving on to Unleashed, where Raikou was featured in not 1 but 2 of the Legend cards, which were two cards that you would play together, and you kind of turned them sideways and linked them up so that the artwork would connect. The first of which being Raikou and Entei Legend, a card that is both fire and electric type with 140 HP. A little under what you would want to see on a legend card, especially with weakness to both water and fighting, in a format where you have Palkia, Kingdra, Gyarados, Machamp, and Donphan running around. That weakness to the overall metagame is what brings this card down, in my opinion, because I like the typing and I like the attack lines. For a fire and a colorless, you can deal 90 damage and discard a fire energy, or for a lightning and a colorless, you deal 80 damage to each Pokemon that has a Pokemon power, yours and your opponent's, but if you're playing this deck, you're not going to be playing anything with a power, and then you discard all energy attached. These are two great attacks on a basic Pokemon, even though that's a bit of a stretch too because you have to have both cards out. Those two attacks can be used situationally, and there is some potential synergy there with other cards in the format. My mind automatically goes to Legends Awakened Rayquaza. It's going to want to gobble up all of those discarded fire and lightning energy. The end of the Diamond and Pearl era, moving through Heart Gold, Soul Silver, and then into Black and White, was a really weird time for the metagame where it was mostly a top 3 or 4 decks that if you weren't running those, you weren't winning a lot of games. Looking at you, Lux Chomp. But as far as these legend cards go, I dig the artwork. I really like that art style. I really just wish that the formatting had been done differently. The way that they put the text on these cards bugs me so much, especially seeing what they're able to do with full arts now, where they just overlay the text and it looks fine. You don't have to crumple it up like garbage and stick it at the bottom of the card where nobody can read it. So on to the next legend card to feature Raikou, which is Raikou and Suicune Legend. This one has 160 HP, is an electric and water type. I really love the artwork. I love how they layer in these levels of repeating blue and yellow throughout the artwork all the way down the card. Same complaints with the text formatting, and the same key downfall with this card in that it has two weaknesses to lightning and fighting. The electric weakness means that you are falling down to Zekrom, to Magnezone, to Luxray. You know, some of the most hard-hitting and popular cards across all formats where Raikou and Suicune Legend could have seen play. Let's look at the attack line. For Lightning colorless, Thunderbolt Spear is going to deal 150 damage and 50 damage to yourself, which puts you in a not so great position for a Pokemon with 160 HP. For a water colorless Aurora Gain, you're going to deal 50 damage, but also remove 5 damage counters from Raikou and Suicune Legend. So you do have a way to heal from the self-inflicted damage you're doing with Thunderbolt Spear, but it's going to be after your opponent has had the opportunity to attack you. So you're most likely not really going to be using these two attacks in tandem with one another. You're instead probably just going to be using it for a Thunderbolt Spear Glass Cannon, just dealing 150 damage as many times as you can. And you know, next turn, if you're only 50 damage away from getting the KO, then yeah, sure, go for an Aurora Gain. Needless to say, Raikou and Suicune Legend did not see a lot of standard play, but it did get a little bit of spotlight in the expanded format when people still cared about expanded, where Electric's Dynamotor ability was a huge help to any electric type deck. It's going to let you power up big attacks that utilize lightning energy way faster, making Thundering Spear a much bigger threat in the early game. But you had other options with this deck, because in Expanded you could also use Raikou EX from Dark Explorers, which had an amazing 3 energy sniping attack. Electric lets you power it up a turn early, and after you use it, you can start getting those lightning energy right back onto Raikou EX through Electric's Dynamotor ability. And Dynamotor is stackable, so you could use multiple per turn and completely repower a Volt Bolt to snipe for 100 damage, discard those energy, Dynamotor them right back onto Raikou, and it's a really fun loop. You're going to keep sniping for 100 for as long as it's useful to you, hopefully getting a lot of OHKOs off of basic Pokemon sitting on the bench. But if you need to deal a bigger chunk of damage, say 150 damage, you could instead Dynamotor those discarded lightning energy onto Raikou and Suicune Legend for a big Thunderous Spear. Dark Explorers Raikou EX did see some top tier standard play, as a backup sniping option for Rayquaza EX decks using the same electric dynamotor acceleration loop shenanigans. I guess it's also worth mentioning that this Raikou EX got a pretty decent looking full art, but I've gotten a little bit ahead of myself. I completely skipped over the Heart Gold Soul Silver promo Raikou. It's just kind of whatever, 3 energy, 70 damage, but you can't use that attack next turn. It's the only attack. Raikou only has 80 HP, sure. Call of Legends Raikou has 90 HP and also has a 3 energy, 70 damage attack, but this time the lightning energy are also serving to give Raikou free retreat. And yes, this time the 70 damage attack is also dealing 20 damage to one of your own Pokemon, but that's not necessarily a bad thing. Not when you have the iconic Outrage Zekrom sitting on your bench. The strategy there is pretty obvious. You stack damage counters onto Zekrom and then you deal a whole lot of damage for only 2 energy. Takes a little bit of extra setup, but it does make for a nice big basic electric deck. So then let's skip back ahead to XY Breakthrough where we got another Raikou. This one isn't outstanding by any means, but it's a really great draft card, or a theme deck card, however you want to use it in a limited format. Same can be said for Shining Legends Raikou. It's a great draft card, it's a great theme deck card. That's about where the usability stops though. You really start to notice the power creep on this one where 90 damage for 3 energy is considered just meh. Because the Lost Thunder Raikou, that is a theme deck card, is actually really good in that Ampharos theme deck that you can use on PTCG Online. Having to deal with that Split Bomb Ampharos and this Raikou that is definitely going to be dealing 120 damage for 2 energy. Yeah, if you're playing that theme deck metagame on PTCG Online, you either go for a Charizard deck or you go for that Lost Zone Ampharos deck. It did get an alt art reprint as a Sun and Moon promo, which I'm glad it did. I like this artwork a lot better than the original. And speaking of artwork, I guess I gotta talk about this abomination. The Raikou Entei and Suicune Jumbo card that was included in the Legends of Johto GX Premium Collection. I don't know if you guys remember back in 2018 when the Pokemon Company was doing this year-long celebration of legendary Pokemon. So every legendary Pokemon got like a product release. It had a distribution code so you could get it in-game. And during the month of the Legendary Beasts, we got this weird amalgam product where you got GX promos of Raikou and Entei, but not Suicune. But then you did get a Suicune pin and coin. And then you got this Jumbo card that included the whole trio of Legendary Beasts, and it's supposed to be a callback to that really cool Jumbo promo of Articuno, Zapdos, and Moltres, with the really nice Mitsuhiro Arita artwork, a cool stupid attack that made you go, whoa, that's a lot of damage as a kid, even though it wasn't a playable card. So on paper, you take this same idea and apply it to the 3 Legendary Beasts, you can just shut up and take my money, I want it. Instead, what was produced is this artwork that any 9-year-old could cobble together. It looks like the Pokemon Company just asked an AI to make some Raikou, Entei, and Suicune artwork back in 2018. It's a normal type card, which doesn't make sense. It made sense for the birds because they're all flying type. Its attack does do 1,000 damage, which does make your stupid kid brain go, whoa, that's more than a Charizard can do. But then you have this dog shit line written by a marketing team, it sounds like. Raikou, Entei, and Suicune embark on a year of legendary adventures. I just hate this so much. Whenever I saw the solicits for that product before it hit shelves, I was so excited about it. I was like, I'm all in on this. This is going to be day one purchase. And then when I saw it in person, I was just so disappointed. And that's why I hate it so much to this day. Now we get into the juice, some of the modern goings-on that have made me very excited to talk about Raikou in current standards. So, before Silver Tempest hit, we would look at this amazing rare Raikou from Vivid Voltage, and I would have said, yeah, this is just a collector's item Pokemon. That energy cost is ridiculous. You're never going to be able to use it. But then Lugia Archeops completely redefined what makes a viable energy cost. Lugia V-Star's once per game ability, Summoning Star, lets you take any 2 colorless Pokemon from your discard and place them on your bench as long as they don't have a rule box. You grab 2 Archeops that you have previously discarded on your first couple of turns and place them onto your bench, then use the Primal Turbo ability to search your deck for up to 2 special energy cards and attach them to one of your Pokemon. If you have 2 Archeops down on the bench from your Summoning Star, you're going to be able to power up any attack in 1 turn, and continue to do so every turn until those Archeops are knocked out. Notably, Lugia V-Star is weak to Lightning, as is Lugia V, which has 220 HP. Take note of that, it's important, because Amazing Rare Raikou, if fully powered up, is going to be dealing 240 damage to an active Lugia V with Amazing Shot, while also dealing 120 damage to one of their benched Pokemon. Sadly, that's not going to be enough damage to knock out a benched Archeops in addition to the active Lugia V, but the idea is to get this Raikou into action a turn before your opponent can evolve that Lugia V into Lugia V-Star, and KO an important Pokemon on the bench, or at least set it up for a future KO. The 120 to active and 120 to bench is especially relevant when you're playing against Lost Box, because you're going to be targeting those Sableyes and Comfeys. Lugia Archeops really just took all of these amazing rare Pokemon and promoted them from unusable to extremely viable. Raikou V is also seeing a lot of current tech play. Its fleet-footed ability allows you to draw a card once per turn if Raikou V is in the active spot. And for a Lightning and a colorless, you can use Lightning Rondo, which is going to deal 20 damage plus 20 more for each benched Pokemon in play, both yours and your opponent's. So of course this is another great card to hit Lugia V and Lugia V-Star for weakness, since the gameplay of that deck revolves around getting Pokemon onto the bench. But before that, it was the go-to counter against Origin Form Palkia V-Star. Before Lugia and Lost Box, Origin Form Palkia was the dominant deck. Its Subspace Swell attack for only 2 water energy dealt 60 damage plus 20 more for each bench Pokemon in play, both yours and your opponent. So they were looking to fill up their bench, and notably, Palkia is weak to Lightning. With Raikou V, you could throw that strategy right back in their face with a Lightning Rondo and hit for weakness for some pretty big damage. At the time of recording this video, Crown Zenith hasn't hit shelves yet, so I don't have a good English scan of the new Raikou V alternate full art, but I do have the Japanese scan from V-Star Universe, and just like most of the other artworks in V-Star Universe, this Raikou V reprint looks phenomenal. All 3 legendary beasts are getting these full art reprint treatments, and they all look pretty good. I think out of the 3 though, Raikou is probably my favorite. And that's gonna conclude our look at all of the Raikou cards printed in the mainline TCG up until this point. Per the usual, let me know down in the comments if I missed any Raikou cards. Let me know what your favorites are, as well as any favorite experiences you have playing Raikou cards. Stay tuned for Entei and Suicune histories in the coming weeks, and stay tuned to the channel for more vintage Pokemon TCG content. I thank you so much for watching. Social media links in the description. Bye-bye.